to hit record. All right, welcome to the all right, hey Bill. Okay, so welcome to the January 28th.
We're having some technical difficulties.
All right, I'm going to hold off just for a sec then.
Alice, good. Want to go one more person. Kala, how did you end up finding the passcode?
I should have remembered from last time. You have to register and then it sends an email to you. And in my case, it goes to a spam folder. So I had to go to there and then find the passcode.
Would you mind reading it to me?
Yeah, sure. The passcode is 724358.
Thank you. Okay. Jimmy McCarty is going to join us at some point.
All right, well, we'll get started, and I think we're going to have a couple of people kind of coming in. It looks like we're missing Melissa Paley as well, and I had thought she was going to be here, so we might have a few people coming in, but today is welcome to our January 28th MAM meeting. This is the Municipal Alliance for Adaptive Management members meeting, and I am going to do a roll call for folks present, starting with the City of Dover, Gretchen Young. Dennis Messier.
City of Newington, Dennis Messier. Town of Newington.
Town of Exeter, Paul Velocich.
Suzanne Woodland, City of Portsmouth.
Katie Ambrose, City of Rochester.
And do we have any members from the town of Milton or town of Rochester? I mean, excuse me, Rollinsford? And then it does not look like it.
One moment. So
I had talked to a couple of them. I hadn't heard that anyone was coming, so that makes sense. All right. So next order of business is the approval of the December 2nd meeting minutes.
I'll move the approval of minutes of December 2nd, 2021.
I'll second that.
All right, and with all the members here, can we just have a vote? Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
All right, and now moving on to item number 3, which is the main topic of today's meeting. So we are about just over 6 months into our adaptive management plan. So we put it together in July and submitted it. There's a lot of work that went into that and a lot of stakeholders and participants that helped. And we've been doing a lot of good work since then. And I think we all thought it was a good idea to take some time, go back through what we had talked about with the adaptive management plan and kind of go over where we are, make sure we're on track, make sure everyone understands where we are. So I did pass out a spreadsheet, and you know, it's kind of a funny way to look at this, but I thought it was a good idea because it itemizes each commitment that we made in the adaptive management plan. And it just sticks to that. So I thought that this could be a helpful way for us to go through each of the items that we did. I would like this to be a conversation. So please, you know, as we go down, join in. And then I'm going to ask, you know, if discussions needed or questions are answered, please PrEP or UNH or DES, please feel free to participate in the conversation, answer questions. So the first piece that we have in the adaptive management plan is our section A, which had to do with the monitoring. We'll call it had to do with the monitoring. So the first piece that we had committed to in the AMP is the stakeholder engagement, the PRMC participation, and recommendations from PrEP Tech committee convened by CLF. And you'll see Kala is here today. He did, that is on track, and he made a note that their next PRMC meeting is scheduled for June 2022. Well, I'm going to do share screen. Folks should have gotten this via email, but those who haven't, I think we're going to go ahead and share the screen. Yeah, it's still going to be hard to see on the screen, but I think everyone should have gotten it via email as well. But so going to this first item, this was something that was important to all of us as we were pulling this together, this transparent ability to do the monitoring and to be able to have participation from all of the members here, as well as all of the communities. So I'm curious if anyone has any questions. I don't see it. If anyone has any questions about participating in the PRMC process.
It would pop up if they have their hand up.
All right. And Melissa, thank you for joining us here. That was something that first commitment was something that had been important to CLF as well. So I believe you are working with the prep group and participating in those PRMC meetings, correct?
Yes, I have been. First, sorry about being late. I was having trouble getting in, also for missing the tour. Can you expand the screen size of
Melissa, you should have gotten the spreadsheet from me in an email as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so again, just to recap kind of where we are. So we're going through the commitments that we made in the adaptive management plan. And in order to do that and sort of facilitate this conversation, this was something that a couple of people had brought up and making sure that we were on track. So I went through each of the items that we committed to in the adaptive management plan. And, the really quick version is that I believe we're on track, but I do want to go through each item, not necessarily to belabor each one, but if anyone has questions or wants to chime in or make comments, make additions, I hope you do so. So anyway, we'll keep going unless, Kala, you have anything you want to talk about with the stakeholder engagement. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
So the first column notes that there's PRMC, the Piscataqua Region Monitoring Collaborative. Those meetings are less frequent right now. We are having quite a few TAC meetings, which stands for the Technical Advisory Committee for PrEP, and that is completely open to anybody who wants to participate. We had one yesterday, I believe. And we're having those on a monthly basis. Right now, they're really focusing on the state of our estuaries report, which is going to be released in December and is in development. But we also talk about other issues that might be of interest to folks. So if anybody wants to attend those, they're open to everybody. Brown and Caldwell has been attending those meetings, which has been great. And in terms of the PRMC, we haven't had a PRMC meeting since last June, actually. And everything else has been sort of interim communications. And then the next PRMC meeting will again be in this coming June to talk about preliminary budgets for funding things that happen in 2023. I had a meeting this morning with Brown and Caldwell, and we'll be having lots of meetings between now and June so that we can present you with some good materials when that meeting comes around. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So again, I think that prep and the work that you guys have been doing has been very transparent, open, and taking lots of participation. So with no other comments, we're going to move on to the nutrient load estimating. And Paula, I might as well just keep you on. So you're going to talk about the assessment was published through the State of the Estuaries, and you have first drafts due in April of this year.
Yeah, that's correct. And I also wanted to say that all of these TAC meetings are available. They're recorded Zoom meetings, and all the notes are also being provided. So all you have to do is go to our website, Technical Advisory Committee at the PREP website. That way you don't have to sit through the entire meeting if that's not your cup of tea, but you can kind of quickly scan and go to the places that you're most interested in. Like yesterday, we had some really fascinating presentations on both seaweed, phytoplankton, eelgrass. And those you'll be getting announcements about that if you're on the TAC list. And if you're not, you can get added to that. And to your original question, yes, we are expecting nutrient loading assessments. In fact, that is going to be a presentation at our next TAC meeting. Michelle Daly-Shattuck is going to discuss, from UNH, is going to discuss her approach to assessing nutrient loading, both from point sources and non-point sources, and how that's going to be reported on in the state of our estuaries. And that'll be the next TAC meeting is either going to be late February or early March. And we'll let everybody know when that gets scheduled.
Perfect. Any questions about that from participants? All right, moving on. So the water quality monitoring samples in the 8 tributaries, and then we also have the water quality monitoring samples at the 12 stations. Carla, do you have anything to talk about that?
Nope, everything's on track.
Okay.
Happy to answer questions.
All right, perfect. Then we move on. We had tier 2 eelgrass monitoring with the water quality and sediment monitoring, seaweed measurement, percent of organic matter, and grain size of sediment. And this was something I believe we just funded.
Yep, and the row above that is eelgrass distribution assessment, which is the metric that a lot of people pay attention to, just like how many acres of eelgrass do we have throughout the entire estuary. And so last year, for the first time, we used drones and satellites rather than an airplane to assess this, and that is on track. And we should have those numbers within the next month or 6 weeks. And then the tier 2 is what provides you the more in-depth information. It's not just where the eelgrass is, but how healthy is it, how dense is it, et cetera. And that should be coming out also in the March-April timeframe.
Great. The green crabs monitoring.
Yep, that's being done and won't be in the main report, but we expect to have a section of our expanded State of the Estuaries report where we're looking at some data over the last 3 or 4 years specific to the Great Bay Estuary, and then also hope to include some other data that's more about the Gulf of Maine region, because we're seeing lots of different green crabs, new subspecies of green crabs as well. So quite interesting.
Great. Excellent. All right, river discharge measurements. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the rest of this. The river discharge measurement, evaluate collected data to assess relationships between potential eelgrass stressors and metrics on eelgrass health. Append data to prior monitoring PREP, broad access to data through PREP, and public access to data through PREP. Can you talk about those last few while you're here, Carla?
Sure. So the whole thing about actually connecting different things that we're seeing with the stressors is one of the more focused ways that's happening right now is through a 3-year project that was funded by NOAA. And we've been calling it the Eelgrass Resilience Project. And so that's just started, and a number of you have been attending those meetings, a number of you at the table right there. And, you know, that's a 3-year project. First 2 years is mostly about collecting the data. And then the 3rd year, we're going to have these 2 so what charrettes, where we're actually like, okay, you collected all this data, so what? Like, what does it all mean? So that'll be 2024 when we're all starting to interpret what all this data means. So I'll leave it there unless there's further questions.
All right, I am going to open it up. I really like some questions. Anyone who's got questions about how this monitoring is going, whether it's staying on track, this could be a good time to discuss if anyone feels there might be additional work that we need to do, or if there's any anything you think we're not on track with or should make changes to the adaptive management plan. I think this would be a good time to have any comments.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Kala, can you share on the sections about broad access to data through PrEP and public access to data through PrEP? I know I've received inquiries about data sondes and what have you, and where do we stand on that? And if we get questions about data, how should we best direct folks?
Good question, Katie. You can actually, we've been bringing online a new PrEP database. And I believe the data, all the data that you're referring to from the sondes, as well as the grab sampling. So there's two types of data being collected, automated sondes or sensors, and then the grab samples. And all that data through, I believe, 2018 is now in the database. And if you'd like, I believe I'd shared this before, but I can do it again. If there's a website where you can go to, the database is in sort of alpha or beta or whatever they call it mode right now. But it actually works, and you can download all this data, and the database has a graphing function where you can actually say, oh, okay, I want to look at TSS and nutrient concentration at these two stations over this period of time, and it'll graph. And then you can download all the data in a CSV format. So that's available to anybody who wants it now. The user interface still has some improvement, but it's kind of the best thing going, even though it's still early on in the user interface development. So I'm happy to share that website with you. And the developer of that is Miguel Leon, and he's happy to receive feedback like, hey, maybe you should do this. I'd like to have this kind of a tool. So yeah, and any sort of data questions you can go to me with, and you can also just provide people with that database URL so they can play around with the data and see what we have available.
That's great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Would that be something that we could link to the mail website? This is kind of the central location, or is it still not developed enough where we want to be kind of posting it out that broadly?
That's a really good question, Katie. You know, I would ask some of you who are there, it's hard for me to be objective. I would ask that some of you who are there to go on and test it out and tell me if you think it's ready to be shared. I think it might be, because even though we have a ways to go in terms of the user interface, like I say, there's nothing else like it. I mean, you literally can select a buoy and grab the data and then get a graph within 30 seconds. So, you know, it's got some improvements to do, but it's pretty cool.
And Kala, if we link to that, would it just, you could make the improvements, but we would just be linked to it. So people could, as it got better, it would just become easier. So I think that's a good idea. If you're ready, if you're comfortable with that, I think that would be wonderful to be able to link to.
I am, and if there's a problem, like if Miguel is getting,
Just get it on our page.
yeah, if Miguel is getting too much feedback, he can let me know, and then we can change the URL and start over. But I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think you're only going to get the really people who are super interested. I don't think it's going to be that many, and I think it's going to be really helpful to the good development of this thing to get feedback.
Good.
Excellent.
I agree.
And just a quick follow-up question for clarification, Kala, will the data from the Eelgrass Resilience Project also be on this website, or is this isolated just to the automated sondes that you're talking about and the other source?
Priority is given to ongoing monitoring that has an established QA/QC process. Discrete research projects like the Eelgrass Resilience Project eventually will end up in the data management system, but it might take a while just because of the priority of getting all that. We're collecting so much data that has to get QA/QC'd, because that was part of the the deal when we entered into any of these things. We have to create quality assurance project plans with EPA. So the tier 2 monitoring that you funded, the eelgrass assessment, all of that has QAPs with very strict deadlines. That's not the case with the eelgrass resilience project. So it's kind of just lower priority in terms of making sure the data are good, but eventually we want all the data to get into the database. For the eelgrass resilience project, that has some special outreach associated with it, that being the so what or charrettes that I mentioned earlier.
Great, thanks. Excellent. Any other questions? Or I see there's some folks from other communities. Or do you all have anything you'd like to ask, or access to data? All right, great. Well, then we'll move on. Paula, I think we'll pull you back on later, but next we're going to move on to the methods to track reductions and additions of total nitrogen. And I just want to remind folks where we are with the PTAP. We just funded or agreed to fund $50,000 worth of work, which is going to fund quite a bit of the outreach for the PTAP folks. And I'll allow Sally and Jamie to speak to that a little bit. I'm going to go through our specific things that we talked about in the adaptive management plan. So the first piece is the municipalities entering data in PTAP for private structural and non-structural BMPs. And I had made a note, it looks like I had it in here twice, so I apologize, but I made a note. There's 4 active communities, and note that funding is approved for added assistance. As you know, Katie has sent out the invoices to all the communities. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for that to get back, and then we'll be able to pass the funding on. And as part of that initiative is that we're going to have the PTAP folks really going into the communities and helping the ones that aren't already running with it really implement. So with that, I guess I'll open it to you guys, Jamie and Sally, if you have an update on how that's being used.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the plan. I mean,
Yeah.
Jamie and I were just recently talking about potentially doing some training videos that we could post, because folks are having, difficulty with data entry and stuff, and we think maybe if we could just video an example and then put it up there. So we do know we need to do that, and we're starting to talk about that and how we might approach that. I don't know, Jamie, you want to add?
Sure. Yeah, so for communities, I think Exeter, Dover, and Portsmouth have added specific language to their regulatory application process, right, for the applicants to utilize PTAP. And so we've seen a few come in for Portsmouth, and I'm currently working on one. Jamie McCarty sent me an email, and I'm trying to connect with them directly. And what we would do is just help facilitate entry. I think it's new enough that, people might be having some issues with how do they classify inputs, and, what boxes are really critical with respect to the accounting, and because if you don't specify in certain boxes, then you get no answer. So I'm reaching out right now to them, and we'll try to post that somewhere, right? Record it and post it, so that these will be training videos available for others who might be experiencing something similar.
Perfect. Any communities have questions or comments that they want to add about getting geared up with the PTAP?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
A couple months ago, you guys put on a training thing on Zoom or one of those sites. Was that recorded?
Yes.
Okay.
I can send you a link.
Please.
Would that help?
Yeah. I was on vacation at that time.
Okay.
I would have liked to see that. Thank you.
I think we could probably share that on MAM as well, but
yeah, I have it. This is Jamie McCarty. I have the recording. It's
up the top tab, PTAP section. That's our city's sort of informational page, explains what PTAP is and the enhanced stormwater regs we've added to our site plans, and then I'll do that.
Hey, Jamie, you're breaking up. We can we'll catch up and grab a link from you and probably add it to the notes.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. I think you said you'll put it in the chat.
Perfect. And then as an update, I did speak to a few people in Rollinsford that weren't able to make it today, but their plan is once either Jamie or somebody is able to reach out to them, they plan to put it into their regulations. They've got the SWA requirements in their regulations already. And so that this would be the next step. And I'll get to this when we talk about some of the overall source reductions, but kind of waiting for that next step to really start tracking what their reductions are too. So that's kind of the next PTAP piece from them. Did you do an update?
Newington?
Sorry, I thought you guys like.
Well, sorry. Newington, we were below our nitrogen limits considerably. We hover around 3 to 5. They clean catch basins, not that Newington has many, but they cleaned them. And they have one of those percolating parking lots in the new development. So the small things.
So I think the next step for you guys too is to get the where you input in that data into the computer.
Oh, okay.
Just hammer it out.
I'll talk to Mike Curry.
Yeah, Mike Curry, and get UNH out there and get it into the regulations.
So yeah, we do have instructions for use and that we've been updating. But as with any new system, you know, that's why we want to be available for technical assistance so that people, you know, it just becomes like filling out, you know, modeling it in TR55 or some other program, right? It's going to take a little bit of, there's going to be a learning curve, but we hope to help people along. The other thing that we're working on is, so Dover, Portsmouth have taken advantage of senior projects that look at existing infrastructure. And I think we can say for those towns or cities with significant structural BMPs already in the ground, that there is a benefit to getting them in the database. We're working with UNH this summer as well. And what we're exploring now is a one-time kind of import feature to the database. So, you know, the hope is just like we export them to the back, we could do a one-time import feature if you can kind of align your so the asset management data that you might have in your system might not have all the right things, you know, and that's kind of what we're finding. But we're going to try to work on an import form. So if you can arrange everything for your municipal owned BMPs that currently exist, you could send it to us and we could batch import all of them. So we're going to be working on that this summer.
Perfect. Okay. The rest of this is fairly, it's kind of just a subcategory to what we just talked about. So I'm going to go down all of that and then open it up for questions again. So the use of the PTAP for structural measures, use of the PTAP for non-structural measures, use of PTAP for land conversion, use of PTAP for septic systems. The septic systems was something that we all talked about. Accounting using the BATT, long-term nitrogen tracking, thematic mapping, and program development and technical assistance for tracking activities. So Jamie or Sally, would you like to speak to any of those?
The long-term thematic mapping, our vision is, you know, we can, depending on your inputs, we can summarize that annually and provide reports annually. And then after the 5-year permit term, you know, we'd like to, those who have been actively using the database, we can summarize that and develop reports of where you are with respect to there's no reduction targets, right? But we do have some potential benchmarks that have been discussed, and we can just kind of give you where you are with respect to it, at least where the only real load non-point source load allocation data we have is from Given This, that Great Bay point source nitrogen source study. So, you know, that's what I envision the thematic mapping to be is. Here's your 5-year efforts. Here's your load reduction from non-point source, and here's where you are with respect to the, you know, at least some of the targets that have been discussed.
Yeah.
That study, I would say, is outdated at this point.
It's outdated, but it's all we have with respect to just providing a number, an allocation of non-point source nitrogen load for each community. So if we take it kind of as a high level benchmark, you know, of like Dover, you have like 38,000 pounds.
Yes.
A nitrogen allocation. So if we take, you know, if you're supposed to reduce 45% of that in the 23-year permit term, then we can show you where you are. You know, give you a little dashboard of what you've done, and, you know, at least according to, again, the benchmarks that we have, where you fall.
I think the important step is to make sure communities are getting the information into the PTAP. So we'll really take advantage. We funded this as a group, take advantage of Jamie and Sally, and like Daniel, you've got other people that can help to really make sure that you're able to get it into your community and do it in a way that's easiest for you. So some communities like Dover have the applicants putting it in for private developments. I think Jamie and McCarty's probably thought about this the most in the communities. And so he's a good resource too, not to send questions his way, but he's a good resource. I see, Melissa, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jamie if that ability to quantify total load reductions over a period of time, that would be based entirely on what's entered into PTAP. Is that right?
Yes, so the structural and non-structural measures to reduce nitrogen are all about entering into PTAP. Our feeling is that land conversion and general data based on the land use and land change activities will likely do every 5 years when we get new impervious cover data. So the last data we had was, we didn't, 2020, we don't
2015, I think.
2015, right. So we did a comparison between the 2010 and 2015, and it's very, very easy to look at long-term trends via that GIS. So that, I think, is going to be the most efficient way. If you're relying on PTAP to do that, it's just a little bit coarse, and there's no real definitive answer of what de minimis is yet, right? It's all kind of based on your regulatory interpretation. Like Newmarket was putting in 2,500 square feet of patio into the database. And, you know, that's a lot of work for 2,500 square feet, but you know, everybody's going to have a different kind of threshold for what de minimis is and what gets permitted. So I think using the land use change is going to be the best way to track that over time.
Jamie,
go
ahead, Melissa.
Oh, I'm just trying to clarify. It those seem like two different methods, right? One is land use change, and the other is what's actually entered into PTAP.
Yes. So for new development, we are tracking that, and we're tracking the additions of nitrogen, and then, you know, we're going to be tracking net gain or net reductions in nitrogen. So for new development, you know, you're never going to be zero. So that's going to be part of the annual report. And, you know, retrofits also are going to be ways to reduce the annual nitrogen loading. So that's all going to be in the calculation, but we also want to look at long-term trends. And so that's the reason why I parse those two differently.
Jimmy, I was curious, so if you have a community that has adjusted land use regs in place between 2015 and the next round of impervious surface data, and there's been redevelopment, and you might have a site, say, that has more impervious surface, but they have BMPs in place to control the runoff, how are you going to account for that?
That's going to be accounted in PTAP.
Through PTAP.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll be able to cross-reference somehow?
Yes.
And it's somewhat, I don't know, you're gonna have to wait and see what you get, but somewhat it's gonna be order of magnitude. I mean, you have a lot of redevelopment and a lot of stuff in PTAP, and you're gonna be able to see, you know, sort of the level where each community.
Yeah, so I think one of them is for kind of high level, just general historical trends. So I think when we did it for Exeter, in that 5-year period, I think there was an increase in like 30 acres of impervious cover over that 5 years. And so that's the kind of trend we'll be tracking. And, you know, we can track where the land use losses are and where the land use gains are. You know, generally it's loss of open space and increase in residential or commercial. So that's one thing we can track. But then the actual nitrogen levels will be all done at PTAP. And so the benefit is if you have retrofits that you're doing as, you know, so for instance, describe a wetland, we can enter that in, and that's going to be a net negative based on the historical data as it exists today. You're going to have whatever 104, what was the total nitrogen reduction?
406 is the number that we had, but I don't know exactly how that was calculated.
Right.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of some of the redevelopment that we have in Portsmouth. You know, we might end up with more impervious cover, but we also have controls in place.
Yeah.
So I just was wondering how you're going to connect those two. That's all. Because you're going to have we've had an increase in impervious cover. That might look bad on the face of it, but if you're controlling what's coming off of that, it might be fine.
Yes.
So you'll actually even be able to tally up what your total new disconnected impervious areas, and you'll hopefully be more disconnected than new.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on tracking and accounting? Do we feel comfortable? And folks, I guess the biggest push is this is going to be one that each municipality has to take from here and make sure it's implemented individually. And then we'll be tracking again. I think we'll do another update in September, and hopefully we'll have everyone on board and really generating some good data by that point.
So I think the best push now is to make sure you get this into your planning documents so that you have your consultants that are working on developments helping to add these things for you into the database. And it also helps us identify where the glitches are.
Yep.
What's that question?
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Is there going to be any kind of crosswalk between PTAP and let's say the updated spreadsheets that are on the Portsmouth website from the Dover, Rochester, Portsmouth? Like, is there, aside from going into, I wouldn't have access to the PTAP database, is there any way to sort of reference that through, yeah.
So we're still working on kind of like a dashboard look, like we had talked about as part of the settlement agreement. So unfortunately, we sort of lost the staff person I was intending to tag that with, who was very excited and working on it. But if that's what you're looking for, like an easy visual, so we're just trying to find a person in-house who might be able to kind of pick up where that person left off. So that's still on the radar screen.
Okay, you're right.
I would also say that in September, when we do our update, like we did this September, the September coming, I think your update is going to be using, that's when we're going to run our annual PTAP. We're going to have them do their nitrogen reductions So yes, it's going to be, there's definitely going to be a correlation between the lists of projects that we're talking about, but the PTAP data is going to have so much more because it's going to have all of the private development pieces as well. So yes, I think for our first year update, we are going to run our PTAP numbers. That's it. And then we'll see how it's coming out. But hopefully, the hope is that it's going to jive, exactly to what we were aiming for.
If not more, especially.
Well, I think you're going to get more. That's right. You are going to get more because there's going to be all these other things that the city isn't, or that the municipality isn't specifically doing. And then, and we're about to get into the source reduction, but that's where you're going to get we can talk about what these communities are doing right now, but it's going to be, that's where you're going to run your source reduction through PTAP and see what's really happening. And actually that's kind of a good transition into this next piece. So the overall source reduction plans. I'm going to start with Rollinsford because that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. So Rollinsford, they unfortunately couldn't have anyone here today, but I spoke to their road agent and their representative from their sewer water district. Rollinsford's done some stuff, which they said they would do in their source reduction plan, which was a lot smaller than what Dover's and Portsmouth's and Rochester's look like. But they had things like implementing the SWA regulations, and they implemented the SWA regulations throughout the entire community, not just their MS4 area, which is good. And so now they actually do have some redevelopment and development projects that have gone in that have rain gardens that are associated with it. And nobody was able to really calculate what the nitrogen reductions were at the time when I'm talking to them. But once they get this PTAP in place, that's just basically going to be how they're tracking their source reductions. And they'll be able to track they've got a street sweeping program that is outside of their MS4 area. They've got the catch basin cleaning program, which they're really enhancing. They're implementing the Green Snow Pro, which is not nitrogen, but that's really helping people start thinking about the way they do sweeping and catch basin cleaning, which has a great benefit. So that, kind of overloads. But I think in September, when we run this first PTAP, that's going to be your source. That's going to be Rollinsford's source reduction report. Right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, if that question was for me. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, so then moving into overall source reductions, I didn't want to spend too much time in this meeting going through everything. I think Dover, Portsmouth, and Rochester spent quite a bit of time going through all of the projects that were outlined. And I'm going to just go down this list. I think there's a few, every community is doing something kind of above and beyond. So I don't know if you want to just do a few highlights. And I'll start with Portsmouth. So Suzanne or Terry, would you like to give an update on anything above and beyond what we talked about in September?
I don't know about anything above and beyond. We're pretty much moving ahead with the activities that we had on the adaptive management plan. The biggest, reduction that we're achieving right now is at the Pierce Island facility. So we're running well below, it's running around 4 to 5 milligrams per liter, which is resulting in some significant upgrade. We're about, we're running between 150 and 180 pounds per day on the seasonal rolling average basis. And our limit's 341 for the 2 plants. So for the season of 2021 growing season, we estimated that it's about 338,000 pounds of nitrogen reduced compared to the permit limit. We'll continue to optimize treatment through the winter, trying to stay down again in that 4 to 5 milligrams per liter range, if not lower. And that'll be a big reduction of nitrogen overall. Besides that, I mean, we're carrying on with a whole list of other items, and maybe Jamie would want to comment on some of the stormwater items. I'm not sure if you would like to do that, but if welcome to, Jamie, if you'd like to, or not.
That's all right, Jamie. But anyways, yeah, so on track and with a full update again in the annual.
Yep.
All right, and Rochester? You guys have anything?
Yeah, I would just echo basically Fortune's update that we're still on track for the September update and full steam ahead.
Yeah, cool. All right, Dover, I'm doing these in order. So 22% of the nitrogen load, 18% of the nitrogen load. Now we're down to 15% of the nitrogen load in Dover. We're on track. And one thing I wanted to highlight is just we did get some funding. We're going to continue to chase funding. But two exciting projects. One was a secondary clarifier, which is going to, help with especially some of the peaks that we see coming to the wastewater treatment plant. And then we got some funding for starting the design for, as Jamie calls it, and people are calling it, a regional stormwater facility, but it would just, be gathering up about 120 acres of really urban downtown Dover area and trying to put it through some sort of BMP treatment prior to discharging to the Cocheco. So we're excited about those two funded projects and are appreciative of DES for selecting them. All right, moving on to Exeter. I'll let Paul give an update, but I will say I was just representing MAM at the Exeter Wastewater Treatment Plant when they received the EPA 2021 Operation and Maintenance Excellence Award. So that's fantastic. And certainly, yeah.
That's something that might take about 15 minutes or so. Is that all right?
Please go for it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Gotta be able to read. Yeah. Okay, I'd like to start right where you left off there. The 2021 Regional Wastewater Treatment. I've got some
I know, that's all right.
Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant Operation and Maintenance Excellence Award. Senator Shaheen was down at the plant yesterday. And I want to point out that it's just not about 2021. It's about the whole system of putting a new wastewater treatment plant, a new main pump station, and force main to go through it. Because not only did it help with nutrient removal at the plant, but also helped eliminate many CSOs that we were starting to experience. And also it speaks well to our employees on the optimization of the plant. Now the plant cost us $53.5 million with all those other facilities there. And with that, from the year that, the last year, full year that we had the old plant versus last year, we're able to remove 50 tons of nitrogen from our effluent, which is pretty impressive. However, it costs $53.5 million. And basically what we've got for any type of grant was principal forgiveness on the SRF. So it's borne, the cost of this is borne by the, largely by the ratepayers, which almost quadrupled their rates from the old plant to the new plant. So I wanted to start with that, and we're very proud of that award, but also it comes at quite expensive too. In our adaptive management plan, we committed to 1 BMP of regional type, as you mentioned, for construction. And with the help of the Watershed Assistance Grant, we're moving through to get that installed this coming year. It'll, I forget how much it'll remove. It will remove about 68 pounds of nitrogen a year, and it will cost just under $200,000. So those are not insignificant costs also. That'll be constructed this year. And another thing that we're going to be constructing in one of our utility projects is the installation of 2 media box filters also. Now, the next item in our depth management plan was catch basin replacement program. And I know that that's not entirely all nitrogen. However, Exeter has a large number of catch basins that have insignificant sump elevations. And we've committed to replacing 100 of these through the permit cycle. And with our CIP projects of utility projects, we're going to replace this coming year about 50 of those. So it's going to be a big jump towards the 100 that we've committed to. The next item is also a watershed assistance grant project. And it deals with 3 subjects. One is the search for where we can install another one of these BMPs out into our existing system. It is going to be how do we educate our residents about the use of fertilizer? How do we enhance that? And also, we're learning that you have a septic system out there, and all of a sudden you're going to have a heck of a lot of nitrogen. So with the advanced systems that this group has talked about and we found through education, how do we incentivize such a program? So we are putting the finishing touches on the grant application to move forward with that. Now,
sorry, that's incentivizing the nitrogen reduction in the septic system, the grant application?
Yeah, incentivizing the residents to install these advanced systems. And then, yeah, this is the groundwork for that.
Cool.
The reason that we've kind of latched on to this septic system idea is because our consultant back in the June timeframe did a little bit of analysis for us. We had a subdivision come in on the outskirts of town, and that subdivision was 12 lots and 900 feet of road. And we asked what the pre-development nitrogen and post-development nitrogen flows were. And you can put in BMPs for the stormwater runoff, and you can get fairly close to some of the pre-development nitrogen levels. But once you add those septic systems, it kind of like all that effort that you have for structural BMPs is kind of out the window because the septic systems are real big loading to that. And what we were able to calculate is that those dozen septic systems increased the nitrogen levels by 78 pounds per year. And, you know, some of our media box filters that I mentioned about earlier may remove maybe 2. And those are like $14,000 a piece. So it just shows you that you can spend a heck of a lot of effort trying to install these BMPs and retrofits and that sort of thing. But maybe if there was a way right at the beginning of development to help with some of the septic stuff, it won't be as high of a loading. So the next item that we have is I&I removal. And we've got a couple of projects that we're working on. I mentioned that we have the utility projects. One is being built now. It's about a $4 million project. We're finding out that the sewer services in the development, in the project area are very poor condition. Very, very poor. So we're working on, is there a program that we could put together where our contractor can go on and replace the private portion of the services. We've already done this in one area of town 5-6 years ago, but we got to see if there's a willingness, and also we've got to get some costs from the contractor, but there may be another program in this particular project. And with that, there was one other existing subdivision that we were looking at that was high on the I&I list. And through last year, we had a planning grant also to look at our West Side Drive area and see what we can do. That place has a lot of sump pumps tied into the sewer. And so we were looking at ways to reduce the I&I from that town. From that area of town. And then lastly, this idea of we've got to do things differently has caught on. And our town planner, I've got to find the email for his update, was looking to see if he can adjust any land use regulations to help with development and this whole control of nutrients. And I'll just read his very short reply to me here today. The town is working with a consultant in a review of our zoning ordinance to examine ways to incentive development in areas where public infrastructure already exists, and add requirements to septic systems in areas not serviced by municipal sewer to reduce the nitrogen loading of developments in rural areas. And so with that, that's my report, and I'll take any questions.
Is Exeter looking at expanding sewer at all in any particular neighborhoods?
None seem to be a worthwhile effort at the moment in factory cost.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, for those that are interested in the septic side of things, NUIA just put on, the Water Environment Association just had a 3-part technical series in, I think it was September, October, November, or something weird, but they went through about a dozen different manufacturers of these systems and went through the performance of them. It was actually a really good, I wasn't that familiar with them, but I think you can still buy all the recordings, or I can give them to you. But it was actually pretty interesting. They're getting pretty good results. It seems like somewhere on the order of, reasonably down in like 10, 11, 12 milligram per liter range. And the cost, obviously, it requires, we went through this exercise back and forth with our own project. The cost on the face of it look less. They're significantly less than the extension that we're putting in for $1 per house for extending our sewer system, but it still requires a lot of coordination with the private entity, because there wasn't, there's no discussion. It was a discussion about the technology. It wasn't a discussion about implementing the technology in the town, where the private homeowner has to maintain it or use it, or all that stuff was great. But I just thought I'd point that out.
Thank you.
All right. I mean, I was going to say that's the kind of updates I'm hoping we'll keep hearing from you. The implementation, and then I'm curious, are you guys? You might not know the answer, but would you look at review of homes when they're being sold, or would you just focus on new construction?
No, that hasn't been answered
I know,
yet,
just
but,
curious.
But right off the bat, you'd want to concentrate on lots that are within that 200-meter boundary of the water body, because that's where, if you remove it there, you'll have much more efficient results than something that is further away. So that would be at least areas that would be highlighted as being a priority.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, hey, Melissa, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for that very interesting review of some of the things you have going on in Exeter. I was really interested to see in your adaptive management framework your proposed, like a low interest loan program or a loan forgiveness program for installation of advanced treatment systems. And I'm curious if that's still advancing. Also, I'd be very interested in seeing the analysis that your consultants did on that comparison between the sort of roadside treatment versus septic system reductions, if you're able to share that.
Sure. The memo on the subdivision was a good educational effort for our department. And what I can do is I can give it to these folks, and you can already advertise that. Go ahead and put it on.
Yeah.
Are we moving forward with lower interest loans and all that? Well, we're only at the beginning stages of trying to find out what a septic system incentive plan is. So anything could be on the table on what that may look like. And maybe it's a contribution. I mean, I'm saying maybe here. Maybe it's a contribution of the town, a certain amount of dollars a year where people can come in, at least get a portion of it paid for. Maybe it is a loan that they can pay back over a certain amount of time, even connected to their taxes. I don't know exactly how that'll be, but it's at least a discussion because there is a real reduction if you use these type of systems compared to a conventional septic system.
Hey, Gretchen, Taryn.
Yes, Bill.
I just wanted to touch on a point that Paul just raised was, in the case, Terry, you were mentioning that the Sagamore Creek was, the use of municipal funds to pay for, upgrades on the homeowner, and that is somewhat a barrier. And I don't know how we break that barrier down. Because I would encourage. That the more we can do on septic systems, the better we'll be. And that was more cost effective, but it is an issue. And so I don't know. I just wanted to point that out when Paul beat me to it. He jumped in on talking about municipal funds and using it for private.
That's probably also just as big of an issue in the communities that aren't under this permit. Some of the communities that aren't under this permit are right on the estuary and are all septic. So some of our efforts should be towards outreach there too.
Right.
I think septic is a great topic of conversation. When we sort of touched on, we can keep coming around and around to it. It may be something that we can highlight as a specific topic for a meeting, because we can really keep going around about it. I know I've heard Ted say some stuff, and he keeps getting me thinking of new or different ways. So I think, let's maybe do that and dive into it. Maybe look at some of the stuff you had. So that seems like a topic that everyone is thinking about. Any other questions or comments on Exeter's update? Okay, great, thank you, Paul.
Melissa, did you have a question?
No, I just lowered my hand, thank you.
Oh, I think I lowered it and you raised it. I don't know how it happened.
Oh, oops, I'm good.
We're all good.
Okay, pretty we keep going down. So we've got Exeter now. Newington is the 1.38% at total nitrogen load. And Dennis just gave us an update that you want to talk about your plant performance again?
Yeah, the plant performance, we're hovering for 3 pounds to the highest was 4.8, and our limit is 15. So I wasn't that bad.
That's great.
And it's been continuing. So that plant was upgraded and completed in 2018. It's an SBR system. So that.
So that is not where Newington's stopping with their work. So, you know, Dennis and I have talked a little bit about this, but it gets a little beyond just in the sewer plant. Newington is not an MS4 community. They have implemented the SWA regulations, which, you know, any stormwater regulations are great, but what the SWA does, and speaking to the choir, I guess everyone here knows this, but it talks about redevelopment. And is there any community here that has the potential for redevelopment reductions? It's Newington. And, you know, you're already seeing that there was a small piece of property that's redeveloped in that strip mall that has incorporated some infiltration and some treatment. And, you know, I have talked to them. We're going to, once the PTAP's in place, you're going to start quantifying exactly what those reductions are. So that's forthcoming. But I think even in the news, we see stuff about the great redevelopment potential at the Fox Run Mall and areas like that. And those are big swaths of impervious areas. So I think Newington's poised with what they're doing now, which is the plant and the implementation of the SWA regulations, to have some meaningful change just through those two things. And then there's, of course, there are street sweeping and some catch basin cleaning that they're working on that really, I think through the implementation of the PTAP program, you're going to be able to quantify exactly what they are doing and what those reductions are. But I think through your redevelopment is where you're going to see a real positive.
Like the catch basin cleaning had never been done in prior years, and it was done late fall. So some people are hearing and listening and doing.
Yep. I think Newington's a real success story, and it's going to continue to be a great success story just through where the potential that's there. So that is, again, Rollinsford, I've talked a little bit about that already, so a few times. Rollinsford also has the pollutant hotspot mapping, the priority ranked parcels that were put together. That report is all complete, was done through DES and UNH, so they have that. And again, that's something that they're going to have to sit down and go through and can start looking at nitrogen reduction potentials using that report. Rollinsford does suffer from some staff turnover. They lost Caroline Kendall, who was a great advocate and participant in this. So that's going to be a struggle for them. And so, you know, I take that very seriously. I really continue to reach out to Rollinsford, and I will keep doing that. But, you know, that's going to be where MAM steps up. We're all going to have to kind of help them keep on the right track. And Milton is, again, 1% of the total nitrogen load. And they do have some additional work to do. They have brought on a consultant, but there is some work both with MS4 compliance and with getting some nitrogen reduction. They've got quite a bit of actual focus on phosphorus reduction. So they have given a lot of thought to their septic plans, which is maybe going to be an area where they're going to get some additional credits for nitrogen. But that's something I'll keep, again, this is going to be where MAM's going to step in. We're going to really, this is where we're going to lean on you guys to work with them with PTAP and, you know, other communities are going to have to keep stepping in to help Milton stay on the right course. And does any questions about those quick updates? Yeah, Jamie?
I just had a question about your percentages. So from the 22 to the 1%, is that based on the combination of the NPS and the load calculated at 8 milligrams per liter and the 2009 to
that is based on a spreadsheet that we did for the allocation of funds when MAM was being developed. And so it counts for all of the regulated communities, only the regulated communities.
Could you submit
that we did both, and this is load-based.
So that would have your waste allocation that hold the load right at 8 milligrams per liter and your historic flow rate, whatever that was, and then it would be the given NPS. I just want to make sure that we're taking that we're when we do our calculations that we're intersecting the right.
You know, Jamie, I wouldn't overthink this too much. I grabbed this off of it's an appendix to our municipal intermunicipal agreement, and the reason I did this is because I recognize that there is at least one community that has some steps to go.
Okay.
But when you look at what MAM's doing, we're making as a group a tremendous progress. And you know, we have some help to go, but
I wasn't questioning that.
No, I know. And so these numbers might not be right, but I get that that's where I got that from, but the point is there. Yeah, go ahead. 12% of the total load is attributed to the communities on the estuary that are not part of the permit. I don't have that right now. Yeah, that's not something, I don't have that stuff right now. I'm sure that's all been, in the Given This report.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were kind of, we were aligning with your math.
But for the sake of everyone, those percentages I put in there really just for the sake of this conversation of where we are with the source reduction, overall source reductions. Any other questions? Okay. Then moving on. All right, we're going to get you, Pella. We're going to get you back up here. This is going to be section D. Process of comprehensively evaluating significant scientific and methodological issues. And you know, I'm gonna read through these things that we specifically highlighted in our adaptive management plan, and then Pella, I'll just open it up to you to talk about all of them. So we are creating a translator model to equate loads to concentrations, improve understanding of potential eelgrass stressors, data collection, conduct stressor response analysis to move towards a process-based ecosystem model, and provide recommendations regarding studied stressors, eelgrass health in the estuary, and potential management actions or targeted thresholds. So these were all in our section D of the adaptive management plan. Pella, John Potsie?
Yeah, sure. So this is being addressed through that 3-year eelgrass resilience project that I mentioned before. Just looking at these, it makes it sound like that project is going to solve all the world's problems.
Yes, it does.
That might not happen. Just want to throw that out there. Just a couple of quick, really important caveats. You know, creating a translator model is really important. People are always arguing about do we use nutrient concentration or do we use nutrient load? And it's actually sort of a false dichotomy, because you have to do both, and they mean the same thing. Once you understand how the system works, you can go back and forth between the two. It's not a real choice, but you have to do all that work and do it in a lot of different places to be able to understand, well, okay, if Rochester has this kind of loading, or the Cocheco watershed has this kind of loading, what will that mean for concentrations out at the coast? What will it mean for concentrations up in Great Bay? Now, the work to actually do that translation is not part of this project, but it depends on this project. And so when the project's over in 2024, there's going to be more work that needs to be done, which I believe DES is heading up. and how to take all this stressor response information and then turn it into sort of a water quality model that can be used for a TMDL or a TMDL alternative. I don't think anything else really requires a caveat. The last row there about recommendations, I just want everyone to understand when we have these, what I called earlier, the so what charrettes, we're inviting everybody to discuss what they think the interpretations are, but there's not going to be like one interpretation because that's a values. Those interpretations are going to depend on your values. It's not going to depend on science. And so it's going to depend on the values of the organization to take the science and say, well, this is what we think should happen, right? So PrEP will have one viewpoint, DES might have a viewpoint, EPA will have viewpoints, some of the municipalities will have viewpoints. So I just want to be clear that it's not like one carved in stone 10 commandments sort of recommendations. And happy to take any questions.
Not really a question, but I guess just kind of a follow-up to that last point, Kala. I guess, what does that mean for moving forward? You know, where we have the so what charrettes and their different interpretations in terms of applying the science. And, you know, beyond, we get to the next round of permitting and what have you. But I guess in terms of the municipalities, do we need to start thinking about now about applying the science from the monitoring activities? You know, we'll have different interpretations, which makes complete sense to me. But since this is 2024, how do we think about next steps and how do we frame that?
Well, I think the next steps is kind of the next section, which is where we start talking about the way that it's worded in the permit was, the permit was timeline for completion of TMDL or TMDL alternative. And I think that is kind of what the next steps are. And we were pretty clear in even the adaptive management plan that that piece is a next steps in it. So that is the next steps. And I think you can even get into it. A lot of this hasn't even begun because it requires all of these pieces. Is that kind of what you were thinking, or?
Yeah, I guess so long as, I just didn't know if, since we're not quite there yet, but do we need to start thinking about next steps now so that when it comes to that point, where it's also towards the end of the timeline of this permit, we're poised to take action. And I don't really have a specific question or answer for that, something to kind of keep in mind about process-wise.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why we have Brown and Caldwell on the team to help us gather the data, which will then help inform sort of all the inputs and working with PrEP and the other scientists to kind of evaluate what that means, and then working with the state to figure out, okay, what do we do with it? And is there enough here that we can do a TMDL, or do we do some alternative? And yeah, I really see Brown and Caldwell as having an important role in that conversation that needs to take place with these parties that are here about how we evolve it. That's right.
Paula?
Yeah, just kind of following up on Gretchen's comments to your question, Katie. I agree with that. I think it's a really good question that you raise, and I think it would behoove folks to get with DES to think about, because it's hard to say exactly where we're going to be and feel like in 2024, but you can kind of break it down into a couple of scenarios, you know, general scenarios in terms of what we'll know and how that's going to impact what we do from a regulatory standpoint, which is really one part of it that really matters to the municipalities. Now, the other part that really matters is just what are we thinking? Now, PrEP, you know, in 5 years, we're going to have another state of our estuaries report. And a lot of the information from this eelgrass resilience project will go into that report. And we're going to be telling people, based on our scientific consensus, what we think it means, right? Well, we've been doing this work, and what we think it means is if we really want to be sure that the environment doesn't get any worse and maybe even gets better, the estuary environment and ecosystem health, we think you should do this. But that's going to be our non-regulatory take. So I think it really behooves you to think about both sides of this. You know, we're going to be putting that message out to all the citizens who we can reach. And then there's going to be that regulatory process as well. So I think it's a really good question that you raised, Katie.
Thanks, Paula.
That kind of brings us to the next piece, and I don't know that there's that much to talk about, but with the next steps, which is the timeline for completion. So I don't think there is too much. We're still in the data collection mode, unless anyone from DES wants to speak to that briefly today, and then we can talk about maybe doing a longer session at a future meeting.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say right now, I think, on that. This is Ted. Hi.
Good, thanks for coming.
But I do think that this is something we should chat about at a future meeting in terms of where this is all headed and how we think about it. And I think Kala, laid that out nicely.
All right, with that, then, any other questions on the adaptive management plan? We feel like I think we're doing great. I mean, going through this exercise, I think was really nice. People are doing really well. So thank you for bearing with us. That was a long stretch, but doing well. And I don't see any major changes. And our next big check-in would be in September. I think really focused on the source reduction piece for the communities.
Before we move on, I did have one question, please, for the bottom, for the 5-year monitoring plan, because it is identified for 2021 and 2022 in our timeline to at least start. I don't know if Brandon Caldwell is present today, but or they could weigh in a little more on that. But you might need to talk more about addressing that in delegation. There might be a disconnect with if that is actually going to be addressed by PrEP or not, in terms of their longer term planning. And if not, I think now would be the time to kind of pivot, so to speak, on how that would be addressed. But Brandon Caldwell was present. I think they've been working with PrEP and talking about that and have a better understanding.
I'm not sure. Is anyone from Brandon Caldwell?
No, here.
Yeah, I don't see them here either.
I don't know. Kala, have you and Clifton spoken about that? I know we kind of briefly touched upon that it might not be where PrEP has plans in the works, but it might not be necessarily what we interpret as a 5-year monitoring plan. So there might be a gap there on what we're planning on, or our expectation is, versus what's coming forth from PrEP as part of their longer term planning.
One thing we talked about this morning was, the way we talk about our plans, the way PrEP talks about our plans in some cases might not be exactly the way the MAM is hoping to hear about them. Like when we say, hey, we put a line in an Excel sheet and say, we're going to look at turbidity dynamics. And, that's all the information that's there. Now, when we do the work with someone, there's a longer scope, but that's not in the documents that you're seeing. So what we talked about today was that Brown and Caldwell are going to work on a template so that I can get information to the MAM that they want, right? In a form they want, not too long, not too short, not missing any information. So we're working on that for the next couple of years. It would be fairly easy to do the same thing on a 5-year basis, right? So we already have, and I think we've shared some sort of like Excel spreadsheets that basically say, here's what we see doing in the next couple of years, next 3 years, next 5 years. And then that shifts as you get closer and closer to actually spending the money. But it would be, if the MAM wants something in a different template, I think that's something that Brown and Caldwell and I would work on. And I think you're right that Brown and Caldwell would sort of be a great liaison. So they've already been, I asked them today, that came up today, and I said, look, when we meet in mid-February, why don't you bring me some templates? Because I have scopes of work for a lot of this work, but I don't know how you want me to talk about it. And so the same thing that we're doing for that could be done for a 5-year plan, because our plans are not necessarily written up as 5-year plans. You know, we have the research and monitoring plan. That's sort of like a 50-year plan, right? So getting it to a scale that works for you is just something that I can work with Brown and Caldwell on, and I think it's totally doable.
Perfect. That sounds great. Great. Thank you. Do you have something?
No, I'm just sensitive that I know on my calendar I have this until 4, right. And while I have a little bit of time on the back end, I don't have a lot of time, and so I've got to, you know.
Yeah, I apologize. That's when on
no
longer
apologies necessary. It's just I figured I'd alert you that. Yep, I know at least. You know, like I said, there's some time, but just cognizant.
Anything else? All right, well then, thank you everyone for going through that. So yes, we are limited in time. So discussion on meeting format and agenda. And Katie, I'm gonna go ahead and let you speak to some of the things you have been hearing.
Sure, so I had asked if Gretchen could add this to the agenda as an item, whereas we've been really encouraging a lot of stakeholder engagement and involvement. We've had some great attendance at our meetings by stakeholders and folks looking to get involved across the gamut, community members, business owners, and they've been raising some really great questions across the gamut, again, relative to just the permit in general, really specific monitoring questions that we're trying our best to answer, but I think also could benefit from, you know, the whole group could benefit from hearing from that. And also with engaging with our stakeholders. And I just wanted to raise, I don't have a specific idea necessarily, but see if there's maybe a different way that we can continue to encourage stakeholder engagement. You know, the chair's been really great about acknowledging folks when they have comments and encouraging the meetings, but also recognize that these are business meetings and we all have limitations on time. So I thought I'd throw it out there to see, I don't know if there's a way, if we want to kind of restructure public comment for our agendas, if we want to add kind of for each agenda item a section, or at the beginning and the end of the meeting, if there's actually a different form altogether, we should be exploring this instead of at these meetings. But I see room for more engagement, and I worry that some folks that are interested in what we're doing might be losing steam a little bit because they have questions, they want to get involved, but just the public comment periods at this meeting, I don't know if that's enough to help kind of engage that input from our local experts, we call them, in the process. I think a good example would be, we had a great question from a stakeholder. Josh Dane is actually a business owner in Rochester. Great question, I'll try to follow up with him on that, but those kinds of scenarios where we have great questions that come up or feedback. It sounds like the TAC might also be a good venue where that's open to anybody for the monitoring related stuff, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there for stakeholder engagement, and if there's a different way we could structure this to encourage that back and forth, or if we should look at maybe a different forum.
I'm trying to think a different forum. Maybe we do, you know, a meeting, well, maybe not make it a meeting in the sense of more of an opportunity to hear a little bit about this and what the communities are doing in a less formal format. I think if we never get past the masks and Zoom, I think that might help. Maybe it's a small subset of, you know, Gretchen and maybe one person from the host community, and maybe there's almost like a sort of stock presentation with then a very informal opportunity to sit around in a room or, you know, with a collection on Zoom that we're not doing business. We're literally just having that opportunity to take information in, informally answer questions. And then if there are questions or issues that come out of that, then it can come back to the more formal meeting with the whole group. I mean, that might be one option that we could think about.
The other thing I would say is that they have been really business, but we're 6 months in. So, you know, a lot of it is the business of let's figure out how we want to do this. And I think year 2, year 3, we're not going to have to do this. But it was, I thought, you know, for example, this, I think a lot of the business stuff will become less important. Year one, it is just a lot of, and I think it's so important that we get it right, that we're doing it right before we start, you know.
I mean, that business owner, can't they send us a question and?
Or come and participate like they did.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the chat.
We just need to
Today's
get an
meeting.
answer
Yeah.
back because we.
I can't hear either, so
Yeah.
I can't. So is that Bill O'Carroll, that going?
No, I think it was Josh Dane that had the question in the chat.
Okay.
So should we give it some thought, and we can always meet as an executive board if we need to come up and with something.
I think something else to think about is that there are other, we'll think about exactly what we want to do for outreach, whether it's MAM specific outreach or other outreach, because I think some folks from the SWA are looking for some outreach stuff to do. I think Mike Trank said he talked to you about potentially doing outreach to smaller communities. And so I think there are some other things that we could also task with whatever out, like if we get a good ideas with septic systems, there are other groups.
Right.
So
yeah, I really like that suggestion, Suzanne. I think that's actually also kind of more traditional stakeholder engagement approach as well, where you have forums where you can raise questions, have that discourse that also can kind of help involve the decisions or inform the decisions we make at this table as well. And so we keep talking about setting something like that up. And then in terms of meeting agenda as well, I think the only other suggestion I had would be, and again, I know it's really hard with coordinating schedules and location, but the further we can schedule these meetings out, the better it is for people to make sure they can attend if they're interested, rather than trying to plan on their schedules. If we can try to book these meetings out a couple months in advance, if possible, I think we'd have even more attendance in that case.
any other comments or questions to that?
I was just going to make a quick supporting comment of Katie's suggestion that there be there is a stakeholder process built into the settlement agreement, and MAM has been, you know, fantastic about recognizing at least me as a stakeholder. I'm supposed to be representing a stakeholder committee, but you know, I'm challenged by that because there are some great people who have volunteered to serve, but the issues are so technical and so detail oriented that there seems like there needs to be sort of a mid-level way of engaging people so that they understand what is going on with the permit generally, where we are as an estuary, how communities are responding, but not necessarily down in the, you know, the depth of the details that have been the subject of these meetings for the past 6 months as this permit is getting underway. So I think some kind of community forum or a broader, a higher level kind of community engagement once the permit is, you know, as things get rolling would be a really helpful and an important way to engage a broader set of voices in this process.
So do you think that would make sense to do like basically like you and I do together? So it would be the stakeholder, like actually doing it through like the stakeholder committee, but with, and having these forums, you know, community to community forums, but like under the umbrella of the stakeholder committee.
Yep. I think that could be a really great way to do this because, again, the kind of engagement that I think there's a way to utilize the stakeholder committee provision in a way that really would get a broader set of people and voices engaged on the issue, and not just on the minutia of what's being discussed here, but on the larger objective of the permit and municipal response to it.
Okay, great. Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna echo slightly both Melissa and Katie, and just saying that as as stakeholder engagement manager, which is actually my title at the firm, I'm gonna just remind, I think, everybody that a true adaptive management plan has to have some big component of outsider knowledge and input. And if there's anything I can help with in relation to trying to figure out how best to put that together, I wanted to just volunteer, just for knowing a lot about the importance, but also how this could best be a good way for everybody, all municipalities, and being able to bring more people to the table. So I just wanted to offer my services there as well, and just say that I have some ideas cooked up, and I'm hoping that I can just send an email out later today or tomorrow, just to see what you guys all think.
Do you think it's like you, me, and Melissa could have an offline conversation and brainstorm some ideas to
Sure.
do that? I think that could be a good idea.
Yeah, I love that.
Thank you. I'm very eager for that.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right, anyone else? Okay, then in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. Stakeholder comment. Anything additional that you wanted to talk about, Lisa?
No, not at this moment. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other stakeholders' comments? All right, moving on. Public comment. Anyone from the public wish to speak? Okay.
There's something in the chat.
Is there anything in the chat? Yeah. Is it?
This is Josh. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to raise my hand here. Just to, I guess, maybe help as you guys are trying to figure out ways to engage stakeholders such as myself, is that I don't come from government. So I can't tell you how many hours I've spent talking with Katie and Melissa and Hannah, just trying to understand what it is that you guys do. And the acronyms and everything that get thrown around just make my head spin. So whatever format you set up to engage the community, try to find a way to, I guess, dumb it down, if you will, to people that aren't involved with the various committees, because for a lot of people that would be a barrier to getting involved, and I'm just stubborn enough to stick around and try to learn it. So thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to trying to help.
Thank you, Josh.
Yep.
All right. Any other business? All right. Scheduling next meeting and agenda items. For agenda items, one thing I would like to talk about is there's a couple of things. There's so many funding opportunities. I think it's worth really having a little dive deep into some of the things that are out there, see if there's any potential for us to work together, learn about what other people are doing, and maybe ask some folks from DES to talk about all of the different things. I'd also like to talk to bring in some of our regulators, like somebody from EPA. We've actually had some interest from EPA, the stormwater side, Region 1 stormwater, potentially bring them in, see how they could potentially collaborate and possibly get it, like we had talked about earlier, this update on next steps, maybe ask DES to do an update on kind of where they think we are with the permitting. So it would be kind of a permitter regulator discussion was one thing that I had in mind. Any other agenda items that folks want to dive into?
Hey, Gretchen, can I add something really quickly?
Yeah, hey, Tom. I was going to have you do more update this time, but we're running out of time.
That's fine. I'm just going to throw a link into the chat that is for the DES ARPA website. Take a look at it. There's a place to subscribe, so you'll get all the updates, but I think we'll go over it at a later meeting, it sounds like.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Of course.
All right, let's schedule the next meeting then. Well, I think we'll do something between then and now, but I think September will be our next big update on new source productions. But I am thinking like April. Does that sound good to folks? It was 2 months?
January.
Well, end of January.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with that. Yeah.
So we're in the last week of January now.
Or end of March or April.
We want to stick with the last week of the month.
Not for April.
For April? No, not for April. No, because people are. No, I would think I would do a little bit earlier, like the first.
April Fool's Day.
I don't know about April 1st, but I won't do it on Fridays for you guys anymore.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, the scheduling for this one was tough.
The only Thursday I can't do is the 14th of
April 7th? And
what it
is there a time that people are thinking?
I've got a meeting right now at 2 on the 7th.
If we did like 10,
probably move it, but if we can do morning,
yeah, does 10 like 10 on the 7th work? And Paul, do you have any interest in hosting? I talked to Jennifer about this. I put you on. I told her I'd put you on the spot, but she said she'd be willing. There's some really cool upgrades that Exeter did just do and got an award for. So she said she'd be willing to host. If you're, yeah.
So she said so.
She said so. So how about April 7th at 10 a.m. in Exeter?
At the new wastewater plant?
At the Public Works, it will be at the Public Works building because they don't really have a, but we'll talk about maybe a tour before or after for folks who are interested. Or maybe talk about the CSOs and anything you guys wanted to do.
April 7th, 10:30, 10 o'clock, Public Works.
Sounds good. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yep.
I move.
Second,
okay. All in favor. Thank you, everyone. Sorry this went so long.
No, it's fine. It's just
Go outside and breathe.
I have a minute if you want to.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
The storm, everyone. I'm going to need some education on that whole peak out. I kind of got the flavor, but just not being there anymore, they just a little void of
So who is Canada represent? And the other guy.
I'll watch the training thing first.
Hannah, I believe, was working for Rochester.
Yeah, she's one of our consultants.
Oh, okay. I just
And then
trying to get in John.
no, it's all right.